The silver fork slipped from my fingers and clattered onto the porcelain plate, echoing through the open-air breakfast patio like a gunshot. Madeline, my mother's voice sliced through the morning calm, crisp and cold like the pressed linen napkin in her lap. When will you stop humiliating this family? I froze mid-reach for my coffee, heart thudding, cheeks flushing despite the breeze. The toast in my mouth turned to ash. I looked across the long marble table at her pearl-studded collar and permanently disappointed face. I didn't realize being alive was humiliating, I said quietly, forcing a sip of coffee down my dry throat. Don't be clever, my father snapped without even looking up from his tablet. Your sister manages to dress appropriately for family meals. Across from me, Harper glanced down at her perfectly tailored navy suit, the kind of outfit you could wear straight to a board meeting after pancakes. She shifted uncomfortably, her expression somewhere between pity and apology. I glanced at myself, paint-stained overalls, hoodie zipped halfway, hair still damp from last night's shower. I had come straight from the studio, from working, from living. I was at the gallery late, I said flatly. I didn't exactly have time to change into pearls for eggs Benedict. My mother's lips tightened. So this is your life now? Smearing colors on canvas and calling it contribution. They're called paintings, I muttered. And yes, they sell. To real buyers. My father scoffed, finally putting down his tablet. Buyers with no taste, clearly. You know, Madeline, I used to think this was just a phase. But now, you're 28, still living in that shack we call a guest house, chasing a fantasy that contributes nothing. My fingers curled around the coffee mug. I have integrity. I have freedom. That's worth something. Freedom, he laughed dryly. Is that what you call mooching off your parents? I said nothing. Your rent doesn't even cover the water bill, my mother added, eyes narrow. It's a courtesy, one we extended because we assumed you'd grow out of this mess. Harper cleared her throat. Maybe we can talk about something else. The weather's been. Stay out of this, my father and I said in unison. She sank back into her seat, silent again. I took a slow breath, then set my mug down. You're right. There was a pause. I can't do this anymore, I said, standing. Not one more meal where I have to justify my existence. Don't be dramatic, my mother hissed. Sit down, Madeline. But I was already moving, chair scraping the stone floor. I stepped off the patio, heels clicking against the tile, then into the manicured lawn barefoot. The grass was cold against my skin, wet with dew. I could feel their eyes on me. My father silent, my mother seething, Harper stunned. But no one called me back. At the edge of the lawn, I turned around. I didn't ask to be born into this, I said, but I'm choosing not to let it define me anymore. I left the rest unsaid. Then I walked away from the table, the house, the expectations that had suffocated me since childhood. The wrought iron gate creaked open with a slow groan, and as it clicked shut behind me, I didn't look back. The silence in the guest house was deafening. I stood in the center of the tiny living room, surrounded by mismatched furniture and half-finished canvases propped against the walls, and suddenly it all felt wrong. Not because it was small or chaotic, but because it was borrowed. A space allowed, not owned. A space that came with a leash. I kicked off my paint-splattered sneakers and walked barefoot over the concrete floor, cold and gritty. My suitcase lay open on the bed. I grabbed the nearest stack of clothes and stuffed them inside without folding. My heart pounded like a warning siren, or maybe a countdown. Either way, I wasn't going to wait for the explosion. My phone buzzed on the counter. Harper, I'm sorry. They shouldn't have said those things. I stared at the message, then locked the screen without responding. Her pity burned worse than their contempt. I went to the bathroom, grabbed my toothbrush, a half-empty jar of moisturizer, and my sketchbook, the only thing that had ever felt like a journal worth keeping. Pages of color and chaos and unspoken words. Pages they never asked to see. By the time I zipped the suitcase shut, my hands were trembling. A knock at the door made me jump. Madeline. It was Harper. Her voice was cautious. Can we talk? I hesitated. Then, slowly, I opened the door. She looked at the suitcase first, her eyes widening. You're leaving? I have to, I said. I can't do this anymore, Harper. I've been drowning for years and calling it compromise. She nodded slowly, as if she'd known this was coming but hoped it wouldn't. Where will you go? I let out a short, humorless laugh. No idea, but it'll be somewhere where I can breathe. I want to help. No, I said quickly. You're still part of that world. You may not agree with them, but you live by their rules. That's not fair. Neither was the way they've treated me my entire life. She said nothing after that, just stood there, watching as I dragged my suitcase to the door. I paused for a moment, gave her a small, weary smile. Take care of yourself. You too. And with that, I walked out. The sun was bright, too bright, and it made everything feel raw and exposed. I tossed the suitcase into the trunk of my battered Corolla and slid into the driver's seat. The leather was hot. The AC sputtered once, then gave up. I didn't care. As I pulled out of the driveway for the last time, I glanced in the rearview mirror. Two silhouettes stood at the upstairs window of the main house. My parents, watching, stone-faced. They didn't wave. Neither did I. Instead, I raised one hand in a mock salute and drove. I didn't know where I was headed, only that west felt right. Toward the ocean, toward noise, salt, and motion. I turned up the radio to drown out my thoughts, but nothing could mask the thudding ache in my chest. Somewhere along the Pacific Coast Highway, the car began to sputter. I pulled off near a small art fair on a pier in Santa Monica, thinking I could maybe distract myself, maybe even sell a piece or two from the stash in my back seat. I set up my tiny booth near the end of the row, the wind tugging at my hair. The canvases looked small and out of place between the polished jewelry stalls and high-end sculpture vendors. But I hung them anyway. Bold strokes of color, unfiltered, undignified, honest. An hour passed. People walked by without stopping. Then another. Still nothing. Then I saw him. Grease-stained jeans, sunburned forearms, and a tool belt slung around his waist like it belonged there. Definitely not the typical art fair crowd. He paused in front of one of my paintings, a swirl of gold and deep red that I'd poured my worst night into, and tilted his head. You painted this? He asked, pointing. I nodded. He turned to me, smiling. It's like looking at a sunset through stained glass. I blinked. That's exactly what I was going for. He extended a hand. Miles. Miles Carter. Madeline Shaw, I said, and for the first time in hours, I smiled. The loft smelled like sawdust and fresh paint, two scents I never expected to associate with safety. It was small, tucked above Miles' half-renovated garage on a quiet corner of Santa Monica. The floor creaked with every step, the brick walls were chipped and uneven, and the windows rattled when the wind hit, but it was mine, ours. We carried the last box up the narrow staircase together, both breathing hard. This place has character, I said, wiping sweat from my forehead. Miles grinned. That's a nice way of saying it's falling apart. No, I said softly. It feels alive. The kitchen was barely more than a hot plate and a sink. The bed sat on a wooden pallet near the window. I draped my scarves over the curtain rods to soften the afternoon light, while Miles mounted his old turntable on a milk crate. That first night, we ate Chinese takeout on the floor, our backs against a stack of unpacked canvases. I should have felt nervous, homeless in the eyes of my parents, no savings to speak of, no certainty. But instead I felt something strange, peace. Over the next few days, we fell into a rhythm. Miles woke early, sleeves rolled, toolbox in hand, determined to bring the garage downstairs back to life. He spent hours under hoods, coaxing old engines to breathe again. He spoke about carburetors the way I spoke about shadow and light. Not just with knowledge, but with reverence. I set up a makeshift studio in the corner near the largest window. My easel leaned against a wall splattered in accidental color. For the first time in months, I painted without pressure. No exhibitions to impress, no parents to placate. Just movement, just release. One morning, as I stood over a half-finished canvas, Miles came up behind me, wiping grease from his hands. "You should sell these," he said. I shrugged. "I've tried." "Not like this," he said. "Set up an online shop. Let people find you." "I don't even know what to charge," I said, biting my lip. "They're not gallery pieces." "They're real," he said. "That's worth more than any gallery label." So I did it. Nervously, tentatively, I created a website, took photos in the best light, wrote little blurbs under each piece, even when it felt too vulnerable. And when it came time to enter the price, I hovered. "You're sure?" I asked Miles for the third time, finger trembling above the keyboard. "Madeline," he said, brushing hair from my face, "your work is worth it. Trust yourself." So I clicked publish. Then I waited. Hours passed, then a day, and then the first order. Someone from Portland bought a piece I painted on a sleepless night, one I nearly threw away. The message with the order said, "Your work speaks. Thank you for making this." I cried, not because of the sale, but because for the first time someone saw me and didn't flinch. More orders trickled in, then commissions, then a blog wrote about my raw, unfiltered approach to trauma and identity. I didn't even know they were watching. Every time a new message came through, Miles would grin and say, "Told you." One afternoon, I returned from the post office to find him standing in the middle of the garage, staring proudly at a vintage Mustang he'd just finished restoring. He looked up at me, smudged with oil and sunburned, and said, "She's beautiful, huh?" "She is," I said, "but you know what's better." He raised an eyebrow. "This life," I whispered. "We built it." That night, we celebrated with gas station wine and grilled cheese sandwiches. We danced barefoot on the creaky wood floors as jazz played from the turntable, and for the first time in years, I wasn't performing. I wasn't trying to meet anyone's expectations. I was just living. The rain had been threatening all day, thick clouds pressing against the skylight, casting everything in a bruised gray hue. I was knee-deep in a new piece, charcoal on canvas, bold and messy when the knock came. 3 sharp raps, urgent and uneven. I froze. Miles was still at the garage. We weren't expecting anyone. I opened the door, cautiously, and there she was. Harper. Except it wasn't the version I remembered. Gone was the immaculate bun, the flawless suit. Her blouse was wrinkled, collar askew. Her eyes, usually sharp and alert, were ringed with dark circles. And when she spoke, her voice cracked. "I didn't know where else to go," she said. I stepped aside, wordlessly. She stood just inside the doorway, arms wrapped around herself, as if unsure whether she was allowed to fall apart in front of me. "What's going on?" I asked. She took a deep breath and broke. "Dad's being investigated. Financial crimes, embezzlement, kickbacks, stuff I don't even understand. It's all over the news now." I stared at her. "Wait, what?" "He used the foundation as a shell," she said, voice flat. "Funneled money through dummy contractors. Years of it. Someone finally blew the whistle." I lowered myself onto the edge of the futon. Why would he do that? He already had everything. "I think he thought he needed more," she said, looking down. "Or maybe he just didn't think he'd get caught." "And Mom?" "She's a wreck. Says she didn't know. I don't know if that's true." The silence stretched between us. Only the soft patter of rain on the roof filled the space. Harper looked at me then, truly looked at me, and I saw something in her I'd never seen before. Humility, desperation, fear. "They're going to lose the house, Maddie. Everything. They don't have liquid assets. Legal fees are mounting, and they need help." My heart clenched. Old reflexes kicked in, guilt, duty, panic. But I pushed them back. They need me now, I said slowly, because there's no one else left. Harper flinched, but nodded. You're not wrong. I begged them for years to see me, I whispered. All they saw was Harper the Perfect. And now I'm the only branch left to cling to. I'm not asking you to fix it, she said quietly. But maybe just talk to them? They won't listen to anyone else. I looked around our small space, the chipped counters, the open canvas, the laughter that still hung in the corners from last night's dinner with friends. This life was hard-earned, fragile, precious. If I go back, I said carefully, it won't be as their daughter trying to prove something. I won't grovel. I won't offer money. She nodded. I'll go as myself. For me. That's all I hoped for, she said. Just don't let their brokenness break you again. Later that night, I sat curled on the couch, a blanket over my knees, the room dark except for the soft glow of the salt lamp Miles gave me for my birthday. I told him everything. He didn't interrupt, just sat beside me, silent and solid. When I finished, he reached over and took my hand. Whatever you decide, he said, I'm with you. I don't know what to do, I admitted. Part of me wants to help. Part of me wants to watch them burn. He nodded. Then maybe it's time you write the ending to that chapter. On your own terms. I looked at our space again. This wasn't just a home. It was a boundary. A line I had drawn in the sand. Tomorrow I'd see them. But I wasn't the same girl who walked barefoot off that lawn. Not anymore. The hallway smelled like mildew and old wallpaper. I stared at the peeling gold numbers on the door, 3B, and took a breath so deep it hurt. My hand hovered over the frame, knuckles pale. I hadn't seen them in person since the day I walked out barefoot with nothing but a suitcase and a cracked voice. I knocked. There was a shuffle, then the slow creak of hinges. My mother opened the door, and for a moment we both just stood there. She looked thinner. Her perfectly coiffed hair was pulled back in a loose, careless twist. No pearls, no lipstick, just a pale cardigan button wrong and eyes that looked tired in a way makeup couldn't hide. Madeline, she said softly, as if saying the name summoned an ache. Hi, Mom. She stepped aside. Come in. The apartment was dim, cluttered with legal envelopes and takeout containers. Nothing like the mansion I'd grown up in. The marble, the vaulted ceilings, the smell of lemon polish and power. This place smelled like fear and reheated rice. My father sat on the couch, his back curved slightly, TV remote in hand though the screen was off. He looked up when I entered and stiffened. Well, he muttered. You came. I'm here to talk, I said. About what? He snapped. How we ruined your life. Go ahead. Get it out. Pile on with everyone else. I blinked at the bitterness. No, I said evenly. I'm not here to gloat. He huffed. Then what, Madeline? You want to see the consequences of our mistakes? You want us to beg? No, I said again, this time quieter. I want you to understand what it felt like to be your daughter. My mother sat slowly in the chair across from him. Madeline, we thought we were pushing you toward your potential, toward success. No, I said, voice tightening. You were pushing me toward your version of success. You never asked me what I wanted. You never saw me, just Harper's opposite. Her shadow. That's not fair, my father muttered. Isn't it? I said, every time I brought you a painting, you asked why it wasn't a law degree. Every time I chose color, you told me I was wasting time. Every meal turned into a tribunal. We wanted stability for you. You wanted control, I said, and the silence that followed confirmed it. My mother's eyes were glassy now. We were scared, she whispered, of losing you to a world we didn't understand. Art, it's not a life we know how to support. Then you could have just loved me through it. My father stood, paced, then turned sharply. So what now? You show up and tell us we failed. And then what? You drive back to your bohemian fantasy, and feel righteous. I stood, too, no longer afraid of his volume. I came to see if you were okay, I said, not because you earned it, but because I needed to know I could face you and still be me. My voice wavered, but I didn't look away. I'm not going to write a check. I'm not going to fix this for you, but I'm also not going to carry it anymore. The shame, the guilt, the responsibility to be who you wanted. My mother reached for my hand, but I pulled back. I love you, I said quietly, but I won't set myself on fire to keep you warm. My father sat down slowly, the fight leaking out of him. We thought we were doing the right thing, he said, more to himself than to me. I know, I whispered, but you were wrong. The weight in the room shifted, not lifted, not yet, but acknowledged, and for now that was enough. The space smelled like linseed oil, fresh varnish, and engine grease, an odd combination that had somehow become home. String lights hung in lazy arcs across the exposed beams. Canvases lined one side of the open room, each mounted carefully on reclaimed wood panels. On the other side, a candy apple red Mustang gleamed beneath soft light, Miles' pride and joy. The door opened again, and the bell above it jingled. More guests, more laughter, more voices rising in surprise and admiration. This is incredible, Maddie, someone whispered behind me. I turned. Harper. She stood near the entry in her signature blazer and heels, though something about her posture had changed. She looked softer, like she'd finally put the mask down. You came, I said, blinking. I wouldn't miss it, she replied, her voice warm. You did this. I looked around at the people wandering through the space, pointing, smiling, studying brushstrokes and bodywork alike. We did, I said, glancing toward Miles, who was showing a group of kids how the engine purred. Harper reached into her purse. They wanted me to give you this. She handed me a cream-colored envelope, my name written on it in my father's precise, slanted handwriting. I hesitated, then opened it. Inside was a single card. Madeline, we are proud of the woman you've become and the life you've built. We were wrong to try and change you. If you're willing, we'd like to get to know you. Not the version we tried to shape, but the real you. The one with paint on her hands and fire in her voice. The one we never really saw. With love and admiration, Mom and Dad. I stood frozen, the words vibrating through my bones. For a second, the room blurred. Harper touched my arm. It's not perfect. They're not perfect, but they're trying. I nodded, folding the card and slipping it into my pocket like something sacred. Later that night, when the crowd had thinned and the air buzzed with the residue of celebration, I stepped out onto the sidewalk with Miles. The sky was velvet dark, scattered with the kind of stars that made you forget you were in the city. We walked in silence for a few moments, hand in hand. So, he said, finally breaking it, what's next for us, Madeline Shaw, soon to be Carter? I laughed quietly, leaning into his shoulder. I don't know. And I didn't. But for the first time, not knowing felt like possibility, not fear. Inside that studio, I had found more than purpose. I had found voice, boundaries, love that didn't ask me to shrink, a family I chose, and somewhere in the wreckage of my old one, maybe, just maybe, something new could begin. The truth was simple. I had spent a lifetime trying to paint the perfect picture for people who only saw what they wanted. But now I was creating the masterpiece of my own life, and I was no longer asking anyone to approve it.